current drama between NASCAR and team owners is getting ugly. Teams are getting ready to leave NASCAR altogether and cause a complete destruction of NASCAR. But there's one man who's been the loudest of them all, Tony Stewart. And you wouldn't believe what Tony just did, as his single decision could tear NASCAR apart and be the last nail in the coffin for all the team owners. So what exactly did Tony Stewart do? And how will this affect the entire sport? We'll be covering all that in the next 8 minutes, so stick around with us. We promise we won't waste your time. There are two major issues that are currently happening in NASCAR, and both of them are directly affecting the team owners from a financial point of view. The first one is the lucrative penalties that are being handed out left and right, and even when the teams are winning the appeal, such as the case with Hendrick Motorsports recently, the hefty penalty remains, and the points deducted are the only thing being brought to the team. This is something that Tony Stewart has felt in his own skin both as a driver and as a team owner, as his last penalty in 2016 was when he ranted about loose wheels on the cars while still being a driver. This saw him lose $35,000 out of his own pocket, and from this point on, NASCAR has only started to gradually increase the penalties and make teams even thinner in a financial aspect of things. As a 3-time Cup Series champion driver, Stewart has a very strong opinion on what NASCAR is doing right now with the sport. But the experience he is bringing along with himself, he knows that words can be very expensive in this sport. That's why he's been very careful about what he's saying in the media, but also very cautious about his moves outside of NASCAR and creating his own race series, which seems more and more interesting and lucrative for the rest of the team owners. We'll get to this later in the video, but first, let's see what Tony Stewart had to say about NASCAR increasing the penalties, just to keep things in check when somebody is stepping outside the rule book. The bad thing is, I have an opinion about it. I have a very strong opinion about it, but this is the part that I really hate about the sport right now. I have a very strong opinion about how they're doing things, but if I say something, then it's going to cost me money. It's going to cost me points. It's going to hurt my drivers and my organization. As much as I have an opinion, I'm scared to voice it. NASCAR has shown now you can't have an opinion. You can have an opinion, but keep your mouth shut, is basically the moral of the story. Even though Stewart acknowledged that NASCAR has the hardest job in motorsports to keep all of the situations under control, he still commended about the good old times in which betting didn't have that much of an influence over how the race was conducted, an era he is desperately missing right now. Luckily for him and for the rest of the team owners, this could soon change with Stewart leading the way with the SRX series, something that could come as a storm to NASCAR with how they've been conducting the recent checks on the next-gen car and the business model. When talking about this issue, Stewart went on to add, "Now, we're in an era where they've backed themselves into a corner a little bit. Now, you've got all this gambling and betting. They can't give you a pit road speeding penalty if it's not warranted like they used to. Kevin Harvick's mad and he's talking about these cars are unsafe. How does NASCAR keep these guys under control? They take these cars back to the shop, tear it down until they find something they don't like, and every car is going to have something they can find. I think they're making mistakes, but it's their playground, it's their rules, and we all play by them." Stewart is by far the only one who thinks NASCAR is making a lot of mistakes in regulating the sport and handling the business model the way it should be handled, which is the second issue as to why NASCAR is slowly but surely headed towards its own demise. As of now, the media rights and the entire business model are up for renewal in 2024, and the deal that was signed in 2015 grants the team owners 25% of the cake. The tracks receive 65%, and NASCAR receives around 10% of the total revenue, which is estimated to be around $8.26 billion. Now the thing is that NASCAR owns the majority of the tracks on the calendar, including the legendary Daytona 500, which means that the family does not rely on those 10% only and is generating a lot more revenue than we think of. To top that off, the team owners are forced to bring in money through sponsorships, which consist of 60 to 80% of the entire funding of the team, an issue that saw JGR's main sponsor for the last 15 years, M&M, withdraw from the sport due to its financial instability. The RTA has made it loud and clear that if this issue isn't solved, the split is more and more likely to happen, and they've backed their statements by not attending the quarterly meeting in which they felt they weren't going to have their question answered or addressed. At this point, the team bosses are just trying to survive, and according to Polk, one of the co-owners of 2311 Racing and an investor in the sport, this has been the factual situation for the past couple of years, and and if it doesn't change soon, the sport is going to collapse. So what is the role of Stewart in this entire scenario? He is basically the guy who has shown the world that if you know how to play the game properly, you'll be rewarded as such. As of now, he has his own racing series inside of NASCAR that allows him to use official equipment of the sport but still be independent from it. And the SRX series is growing day by day. The races are growing, as is the interest, and ESPN is now going to cover all 6 events that will happen in 2023, with some legendary names racing for the prestigious award. Team bosses have now finally understood that they are in this very long time, so they can't be messed around with, and Stewart is definitely one of the right leaders they could have chosen for this scenario to see daylight. The question that needs to be answered right now, and it needs to be asked very frequently, not just among the team owners but among NASCAR's leadership as well, whether the split will benefit each of the sides and whether or not they'll be able to find a proper solution for the ongoing issue, one that NASCAR doesn't even want to discuss and has offered shallow solutions so far. We don't have to look very far in history to see a split that ultimately turned horrible for the sport, as the IndyCar 500 had a fate that NASCAR could soon meet. The CART and the Indy 500 split up in 1980, with the Indy 500 being sanctioned by USAC, while being run predominantly with drivers from CART, which counted towards CART's standing. However, CART was no longer able to fund the drivers and the entire championship on its own, which led to its bankruptcy and a reunion that, while bitter at the time, turned out to be the best thing that the sport would have witnessed. Therefore, the NASCAR family needs to pay more attention to what's currently going on in the world of the team owners. And while we think that the team owners can bear anything on their backs, it seems like this is not the case at all. The France family has been continuously bashed for their lack of interest in fixing the issues that the team owners have faced for quite some time. And with Stewart pointing towards the next potential future for the NASCAR drivers and the entire NASCAR world, it's safe to say that tensions are now higher than ever. A letter was also sent to the France family in which the RTA asked the sport to act with more awareness on this issue because the sport is now at a point where its financial stability is under huge question. Right now, Dave Alpern feels like the sport and the team owners are at a significant impasse, and the charters, the main topic of discussion, need to be made permanent and not renewable as they are right now. Whether this will be fulfilled by NASCAR, time will tell. But as of now, there are no direct indications that NASCAR has the willpower to work on these issues soon. This only points in one direction: a split is more likely to happen, with Stewart's SRX leading the way for the rest of the team owners as well. The cards are now in NASCAR's hands, and we are yet to see whether they'll play them right. But it seems like the France family is playing with fire and is walking on a tightrope that might break any second now.